episode 14, Tim. It says we have Tim Beaubien joining us with then a web interface here. So apologize everyone for my inabilities. I'm a better mortgage originator than a podcaster. But thank you for joining me here today, Tim.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. You know, neither of us are IT professionals, so we're doing our best here, and I'm happy to be on. I'm honored to be the 14th guest, and I look forward to our conversation today.
Definitely. Well, and if you can give everyone a little bit of history here. So we've had everything from realtors, insurance, appraisers. You know, we're just trying to add value, especially in these times of change and people wanting to really hear expert opinions and what's going on. There's a lot of high awareness of and concern of what's happening in real estate. Can you give me then a little bit of background on your title, your organization, what brought you there, and just kind of start from the beginning on that?
Yeah, sure. So my title is the RAPAC director for the Arizona Realtors, which is the association for all realtors and affiliates across the state of Arizona. Kind of a different part of the real estate industry that a lot of our industry practitioners are aware of, but some aren't. You know, when you have to pay that check every single year to your local association. You know, it's going into staff efforts and staff time that are representing all of you and your industry. So it starts at the local level in Flagstaff. There's the Northern Arizona Association of Realtors, which is kind of your local boots on the ground. Then each state has their own state association, which is who I work for in the state of Arizona. And then there's also the National Association of Realtors, which is kind of the parent organization that oversees everybody. So I've been working on the Realtor Association staff side for about 4.5 years now, a little over 1 year in the state of Arizona as the RAPAC director. RAPAC stands for the Realtors of Arizona Political Action Committee. So I work in the Legislative and Political Affairs Department for the Arizona Realtors, and RAPAC kind of oversees everything on the elections, campaign, grant side of what we're doing to give everybody in the industry a voice and support the real estate industry from a political side. So that's kind of where I'll stop as an intro, because I'm sure we're going to get more in depth as what I do with the questions.
Yeah. Well, and maybe on a personal level, you and I have talked about it before, but just for the viral of people that will be listening to this here, why is this something that you've gotten into? What excites you about the politics, the combination of real estate and politics?
Yeah, I've kind of always been in and around the government affairs sector. I was a political science major at the University of Arizona. You can see half of the Wildcats poster in my office behind me. Born and raised in California. That's kind of where I got my start in the realtor world. I was working for the Santa Clara County Association of Realtors as their government affairs director, more on the policy and lobbying side at the local level. I was there for about 3 years. I wanted to get back out to the state of Arizona. I'm super happy to be back out here. There was an opening on the PAC side of things, so I took that opportunity. And really, I just like being in the real estate industry in general, because it's truly stuff that I believe in. I've gone through a home purchase and sale in California and in Arizona. I've worked with all of the different industry practitioners, including yourself, recently. It was a great process. And I believe in what realtors and mortgage lenders and title companies and all of our affiliates, what everybody is doing. I believe in private property rights. I believe in a lot of the policies that we're fighting for as a homeowner and an investment homeowner myself. I really just like the work that we're doing. I'm drawn to it. It's interesting. And so, getting to combine kind of my belief in what we're doing in the real estate industry with also my, affinity for working in politics, it's kind of a match made in heaven.
Perfect. Not many people can probably say that about their jobs, but I'm glad you can say that about yours.
Yeah, I love it. It's great.
And you touched on a lot of things, though, right there. And that I think it's interesting where people we take a lot of things for granted. I had just 2 rounds ago, I sat down with our immediate past president of our local association and then the current Realtor Association president for Northern Arizona. And it's just, it blows you away how much is happening behind the scenes for things to just work, and work in a way that we all, or I shouldn't say all, but that the majority of people feel that direction, right? And so obviously when we start getting into politics, that there are differences of opinions from communities and from professionals. But what's interesting to me, and I'm curious to hear you kind of explain on, is as you were going through that on your passions, it's not just I believe in the realtor profession and I want to protect the realtor profession. It's I believe in property rights, right? And so that's where RAPAC doesn't just, and I'm not trying to be like a, now a sales boy for RAPAC, but it sounds like RAPAC doesn't just protect realtors, it protects homeowners, right? And yeah, can you kind of explain then how RAPAC balances that?
Yeah, I mean, it protects not just realtors, but everybody in the real estate industry, yourself, all affiliates included, homeowners, mom and pop investors that, maybe own a short-term rental or they own a couple of, long-term investment properties. It protects people who are looking into possibly, purchasing a home. The real estate industry touches, almost everybody in one way or another, whether you own a home or you want to own a home or you're currently renting, but you want to try to save some money to get to a point where you can own a home. And so, RAPAC and the realtor associations in general, we really pride ourselves in, it's not partisan politics. We always like to say it's not about politics, it's about policy. And we're working on both sides of the aisle. There's real estate issues that span Democrats, they span Republicans. We're working on both sides, and we're really a group that's trying to bring both sides together. And that's why we really call ourselves the Realtor Party, and purple is kind of the unofficial color because, we're mending red and blue together, that we're working with everybody. It's not partisan. We endorse candidates on both sides of the aisle, and we have to be able to work with everybody to protect the best interests of this industry.
Yeah, and that, and I think that then changes with the time of season, right? That it seems like different things all of a sudden become a hot issue, and you can't just then form up a RAPAC at that point, right? You guys have to be on top of it to be able to then already have an opinion formed and already have a direction and hopefully and all the levers that you've worked to establish to put pressure on and try and protect what you as an association feels important, right? And so what are some of the hot buttons though currently that you'd say, whether it's statewide or Northern Arizona, as much as you can disclose, what are some of the big issues that you see playing out right now, whether it's realtor specific or just property right specific?
Yeah, I mean, something that we've seen the past couple of years, it's going to continue to be a conversation, is short-term rental regulation across the state and within municipalities, and kind of walking a fine line there of, true private property rights. It's your home. You should be able to do what you want with it, where at the same time, protecting the best interests of the neighborhood and the homeowners around you. You hear the stories of the massive party houses and people trashing units, and it's creating nuisances in the neighborhood. And so it's, we're advocating how can we walk a fine line of protecting private property rights of the individual, but also protecting the private property rights of the larger community. And that blends into a lot of different things. We're seeing that with development as well. I came from a state where I couldn't go 24 hours without hearing housing crisis in California. We don't have enough units. That's why there's homelessness. That's why there's X. We need to increase inventory. And you're starting to hear those conversations happen in Arizona as, there's people such as myself. There's a massive influx of population, everyone's starting to realize kind of what a great hidden gem Arizona is. It's not just a massive hot desert. There's beautiful northern Arizona. There's lakes, there's trees, there's mountains. People are flocking to all different parts of the state. And we are going to need more development. But again, doing it in a smart, sensible way that's not impacting the people that already own homes and are a part of a community, to ensure that we have enough water for those communities. We're at, the seat at the table for the water conversation of how can we build and ensure that these communities are going to have the water and the resources and the infrastructure that they need. Just last year, our government affairs director was on a housing study committee at the state capitol. The Arizona Realtors had a seat at that table. So, we're in kind of all these conversations of the larger different areas of the real estate industry. We are relatively blessed in this state, I would say, from a private property rights standpoint. You look at a lot of other states, California, where I came from, New York, a lot of states on the East Coast, rent control is a massive issue that has long-term development impacts. We have a lot of state preemptions that preclude local municipalities from instituting rent control, but those are conversations that are starting to come up. So some of those private property rights issues that we haven't had to deal with in the state are starting to pop up, more and more, and we're taking proactive approaches to ensure that we're protecting those rights for, residents statewide. Those are kind of the big ones right now. I mean, we could have a 3-hour podcast just on real estate policy in general, but those are kind of the top points right now.
No, I appreciate that. And let's really dive into then on the short-term rental side of things. I watched a lot of stuff on that. Very curious on that. I know we're in such a interesting time economically where certain conditions, from my understanding, is that the short-term rental market had just an amazing boom in 2020 through 2022 with a lot of, foreign travel, with pandemic restrictions being kind of off the table and people wanting to be more domestic in that travel. And so I think that really, as far as in here in the States, really pushed on short-term rentals. But I'm hearing that that's slowing down, right? And so there's, right, like we said, with the ebbs and flows and hot buttons of things, with a little lesser activity, maybe that gets us to not only will people be hopefully possibly purchasing less, and then also the use of those units could be less, and so maybe it is less of a strain. But what are some of the things that, from your standpoint, and then the standpoint of the Association of Realtors, how do you strike that balance? Is it regulation? Is it like, I've seen, you and I've talked about, the little city of Sedona, and I read this article back in February that an excellent realtor there in the area, Kathy Howard, put together on just here's all these different ideas that community or associations or different people had come up with to try and address it. And some were, but you could definitely see where one party was really trying to drive, as far as like the party of, I don't like short-term rentals, or I do like short-term rentals, right? That you could see a lot of conflicts of interest in really one-sided arguments. But then there's also a lot of creativity and trying to bridge gaps of, potential safety concerns and, like you said, community concerns. But then where is that balance of property rights? Where do you strike that balance of property rights versus or property rights of everybody with that usage? What are some of your thoughts there?
Yeah, and I just want to take a little bit of a step back first, as you were kind of talking about the STR market as a whole, which I find as fascinating, because when they first came onto the market, there was no playbook for it. There was zero government regulation. The government didn't even know how to tax it. Is it transient lodging? Is it a rental? What kind of bucket do we put this in? And, the regulation has been playing catch up ever since, as it was a little bit of the wild, wild west, where we were trying to figure out what these were, where they were going to fit into. And now, there's some areas that are kind of still treating it as the wild, wild west with no regulation whatsoever. And some areas in some states that are kind of completely overreaching and trying to clamp down on them too much. The city of South Lake Tahoe, which is a massive, resort destination community, a couple of years ago, they completely banned short-term rentals. Short-term rentals are not allowed in their city whatsoever. You have to stay in a hotel. If you are operating a short-term rental, it's illegal. So that's kind of an example of where the needle can move too far, maybe, an overreaction. And shockingly enough, they started to see their tax revenue plummet because people were just deciding to stay in a different city. They would go across the border, they go to State Line, Nevada, and they stay in a short-term rental or a hotel that's technically in a different city, but that city is getting all the revenue generation from people coming and staying there. So I think there needs to be somewhere in the middle where we're allowing it. We're not capping the number. If somebody truly wants to operate a short-term rental, you are allowed to do so. That's been a conversation. Well, we're going to cap it. We're only going to now X number, per the population of a city. That's something we're closely monitoring and, maybe looking more on the side of there's rules, there's regulations that you need to follow. If you violate one of the rules, we always want the first time is a warning before you're getting fined as a first offense because, that's normally just an educational period. People are getting into the industry. They don't know all the rules. And then when you have, aggressive, violent, repeat offenders that it's obvious they're just not abiding by the laws at that point, you can start to implement a fee schedule. And again, on the RAPAC side of things, really, I'm not anymore the policy or the lobbying guy at the Capitol, so I'm kind of going off my best knowledge. I work more on the fundraising and campaign side, but I'm in a lot of these conversations, and that's kind of, I know the direction that a lot of the STR ordinances are starting to move. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess from the standpoint, then in your situation, more on the fundraising and campaign, I say political campaigns, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we're on the RAPAC side, really, we're endorsing and trying to get candidates into office that are going to support our, Realtor Party industry. They're going to support the policies that we believe in. So I've always said the most effective way to advocate is to get elected officials into office that are going to agree with your standpoint, even getting, more realtors and people in the real estate industry that have firsthand experience into office itself. So obviously 2022 election year was a big year on my front as we're interviewing candidates, vetting them, seeing how they're going to align on Realtor Party issues, and then, supporting their candidacy into office based on that. We endorsed a total of 57 candidates for statewide office, and 52 of them got in. So we had a 97 or 91% success rate. And, that's why we're able to advocate so successfully at the Capitol, because we're getting people into office that believe in supporting our industry.
Okay, I was just going to ask you how you did in the last cycle, so that's positive. And I knew, if you're able to share, and this is, pardon my ignorance on it, with life, it's just hard to keep up with all of it. But I knew that the previous governor was Governor Ducey was had actually, specific to short-term rentals, had taken some pretty bold action, right, in support of property rights over regulation. And I guess we should be careful because everyone could say, well, it's my property rights that you don't have a short-term rental next to me. But yeah, it had taken some pretty bold action. Do you know, from the governor's standpoint, it was the current governor, Hobbs, is she someone that, how do you think she'll be on property rights?
We're still trying to figure that out. We stayed out of the governor's race. We didn't endorse in any of the statewide races in the general election. It was a lot of, we didn't felt we had enough information or a strong enough case in either direction in any of those races. We really wanted to focus on the legislature where the bills are presented and where a lot of our advocacy work is done. So we'll see with Governor Hobbs where she stands on private property rights and short-term rentals. She's only a couple weeks in, so it's tough to tell right now.
Sure.
She's going to be in office for at least 4 years, and we'll start to see where she stands on a lot of these issues. I know there's going to be several short-term rental bills that are introduced in the legislature. I think there was at least 10 last year. Only 1 or 2 ended up getting signed. So as those bills start to make it through the committee, I'm sure our governor will start to take a statement on them, but we don't really have an answer yet on where she's going to fall. At least to my knowledge, I haven't seen any public statements yet. She may have, I may have missed it, but to my knowledge, I am unaware of kind of her STR position.
Gotcha. Well, and as it comes to then, and this is then maybe less statewide, right? And that's, short-term rentals or STR is national concern, but more of the water. I just saw an article last week talk about water issues and buildings shut down. I think somewhere down in the valley there. The
Rio Verde foothills. This has been a massive conversation. Water policy is not one of my strong suits, so I'm not going to pretend to try to wade into the deep end, no pun intended, on the water policy. But it is definitely something we're looking at because, as I said, it plays so heavily into the real estate industry. Is we need to build more housing statewide. You can't have a house without water. It's pretty unacceptable to assume that somebody is going to be able to live in a residence without access to running water in the year 2023. So I know the residents of the Rio Verde foothills are pretty scared and wondering what's going to happen long term as their water rates are either going to exponentially increase or it may get shut off. So, this is why the real estate industry needs to be at the water conversation table. The Rio Verde foothills is the perfect example of that.
Gotcha. Well, and so on the fundraising aspect of it is you really focus on that and needing to say, hey, it takes, I guess, where does all that money go, right? That you need to build up this war chest, but what does the war chest exactly go to?
Sure. On the RAPAC side, the Realtor party kind of financial machine in general is divided up into a couple different buckets. You have the actual RAPAC itself, which those funds can only directly go to candidates' campaigns. So those are checks that we are cutting to our endorsed candidates to provide them the funds that they need to run a successful campaign. The other side of the house is our issues mobilization fund, which that goes more towards policy. So that's if we want to support any sort of ballot measure campaign that is going on, we're using our issues mobilization, or if there's any policy that we're supporting at the state legislature, we want to do mailers, a call for action, educate the public on a certain bill that's moving forward. That's on the issues mobilization side. So those are kind of how the funds are divided. And when you're looking from a fundraising standpoint, you have your local, your state, and the federal NAR association. 30% of every dollar raised goes to the national level. NAR receives 30 cents on the dollar. 50 cents of every dollar stays at the state level, and then 20 cents of every dollar goes back to the local association. So it's kind of divided up that all different levels of the Realtor Association, when that member invests, is staying some in their backyard, some at the state level, and some at the NAR level. We created a fun little RAPAC 101 video last year with myself and our government affairs director, Matt Connorelli. I'll have to share you the link, and you can blast it out to all your listeners. It's a fun little couple-minute video that should get a laugh and is kind of educational on the timeline of money, where the funds go, how they're deposited, how they're sent out to candidates, et cetera, et cetera.
So would you say that at this point in time that, especially with a lot of, well, it's interesting because we've had, again, a lot of different economic shifts where there's been a lot of people jumping in, getting their license, and possibly just because of the speed of the market, I assume there's a probably huge number of new agents that really aren't then assimilated as much as they probably should be into then really what is the realtor profession and the support and RAPAC and all these different things behind it. Has that been positive though for, I guess, what are the positives and negatives there in the sense of, has that brought more funding and to RAPAC, or is it because of things were kind of so fast and wild that we really haven't seen that larger base actually create then larger movement, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's tough. You have your, you can kind of say seasoned veterans that have been in the industry for decades. They've probably volunteered at some level. They understand what RAPAC is. They know the importance of it and why we call it. We call it an investment into RAPAC because it really is an investment. At the end of the day, it's dollars that's protecting your industry that ends up saving you money at the end of the day by regulations that we're preventing, potential taxes that would at the end of the day cost your business more money. But when we're bringing new people into the industry so consistently, it's tough. I can't go up and have this one-on-one conversation with our 50,000 plus members statewide. So it's how do you educate them on RAPAC? They see that item on their dues every single year, their fair share investment, to pay just $30 to RAPAC. But if they don't know what it is, they're not going to check that box to pay that voluntary amount. It's just, it's natural. I can't blame them. If I see something, I'm going through, some dues or anything that I have to pay, and there's a voluntary investment on there, and I don't know what it's for or what it's going towards, I'm not going to pay something when I don't know how it's going to impact me or whether it's doing any positive for me or not. So every time I talk to somebody and they're not an investor in RAPAC, but you have this conversation, you lay out what it is, how it protects and support them, they'll end up investing 9 out of 10 times. But it's how do we promote what it is and tell people, this is why you need to invest in RAPAC. It's tough. There's no silver bullet for it. And it's just, being invited on a podcast like this and trying to, spread the gospel and explain to people. And the more members I can touch every day, the more that kind of education starts to spread like wildfire.
And would you say, which part of your job do you think is more difficult of educating realtors and getting the funding, or, and I assume both of these are challenges, full disclaimer, or finding the right candidates to feel confident to invest in? Which do you think is trickier?
Ooh, I have never been asked that question before. That's a good question, because you're right. Both are not easy. I will say probably the finding candidates to support their campaigns that truly believe in the real estate industry, because our fundraising has been relatively successful in the state. We've been voted best PAC back-to-back years by our peers down at the Capitol. So I guess we're doing something right on that front, which is good. On the candidate side, it's a little bit of hit or miss. You can't guarantee that there is going to be any candidate in a race that is going to support Realtor Party issues. You may be faced in a district where none of them believe in private property rights, and then there's really nothing you can do, or their track record is unproven. You try to vet them through an interview, but they haven't held elected office prior, and so you have no definitive voting record where you can say, okay, on our issues, you voted with us 80% of the time. So you're kind of flying blind sometimes. We obviously have a very good success rate with our endorsed candidates, but you can't always guarantee that the Realtor Party champions are going to be out there.
And to build off of that a little bit, is it pretty clear most of the time? I guess and 43% of statistics are made up on the spot. So like what percentage of candidates that you actually decide like, okay, we kind of have a good track record and good feel that this is the candidate we want to endorse. Can you say like what percentage of the time it's a pretty clear cut? Or is it one of those things that, that both candidates kind of have a decent stance on it, or not a stance at all. Like, I guess, does that make sense? Like, what percentage of the time is it pretty clear cut that this person's anti-property rights and this person's for it, right?
First off, I want to say that you said 43% of statistics are made up on the spot. I think you may be even a little optimistic there. My high school baseball coach used to always tell me that 80% of statistics were made up on the spot, so he almost doubled you. So I think the true answer is probably in the middle there somewhere. I think the hardest time we have when we're looking at, and I couldn't really throw a percentage on it because it changes every election cycle, it's when we don't have an incumbent in a race. Because as I said, when you have an incumbent, you can see what their voting record has been the past couple of years, how they have been to work with, how they voted on our issues. When you have a slate of brand new people that haven't held office, that we have no track record on, you answer their questions and we fill out, they fill out a questionnaire from us, but are they really going to abide by that when they get into office? A majority of the time, yes, but sometimes no. So I couldn't put a percentage on it, but really the difficulties we face is when we have a wide open slate of candidates and no incumbent with a track record.
Gotcha. That helps. And this may not then fall really in your specific purview, but one legal piece that I've been seeing floating around that I thought I'd just ask you about is it's not just one. It just seems like this pops up continually, is realtor commission, right? And the whole basis of a seller compensating, isn't that more or less the basis, right? Of a seller compensating a buyer's agent of whom they didn't directly hire, and for whom is not protecting their specific interest. Did I lay that out decently?
Yeah, and that is normally handled at the federal level. I do not envy NAR's team of attorneys because it seems like there's a new lawsuit every day talking about that. A different party is suing the National Association of Realtors on that. I honestly don't know what will happen 5, 10, 15 years from now. It's a little above my pay grade at the national level. I'm not privy to a lot of those conversations, but you're right, that is happening. And I really don't know what the result is going to be. Nothing could happen. There could be a complete overhaul of the way commissions in the real estate industry work. It could be somewhere in the middle. So I just gave you a complete non-answer because I don't have any more information on it, honestly.
Yeah, and my, I guess, assumption, and I haven't dug into a lot of the details with it, other than I assume that the National Association, not that you speak for the National Association, and they're, like you said,
definitely not
big teams of lawyers and people work on these to where they're in support of a status quo, right? Is that more or less the right answer? Is they say, hey, this system works. People close these transactions without complaint every single day. And is that a correct assumption that from that standpoint?
I think so. And again, it's not an official statement or stance.
Exactly.
But, we've been operating that way for decades. It's working. Everybody is fairly compensated. There's nothing nefarious going on.
The real estate industry
hasn't been, operating shadily for the past 40 years or whatever it is. And so if it's not broke, don't fix it, I think is kind of the standpoint of the National Association.
Yeah. And not that I should step in it deep here, but that it always makes me laugh and I do not, I'm a licensed mortgage professional, so I really do stick to my wheelhouse. But one of my worst, and again, not a shameless plug here, but the worst situation is a for sale by owner, and usually we're dealing with the buyer. They got the seller on the other side. And when they're talking to me and representing the deal, right, and kind of asking my opinion about things, and again, I try and stay away from it because, hey, I'm not licensed or cannot represent you in this deal. But when they're showing that, and you and I both know that, okay, if these homes are being sold, but with realtors, and the vast majority of them are, and there is a cost for that service, and then someone wants to sell a for sale by owner at the same cost, right?
Yeah.
And so take off 6%, it's just saying it's interesting to me that you do have the vast majority of people that recognize the value of the service, and then people that think that they can get compensated for none of that, right? Take two parties out of that and make the money. So,
I mean, I learned it firsthand, the value of a realtor and a professional mortgage lender and everybody in the industry. The first time I bought a home in California, I'm involved in the real estate industry. My family has owned properties. I've been advocating for the real estate industry for almost 3 years now. I've been talking to realtors daily. How hard can this really be? And I mean, I would have been lost without my realtor, who was my local association president back when I purchased my first condo in the Bay Area. And that was when it really hit home to me of everything that realtors are doing and everybody in the industry are doing, and how much time and effort and how difficult of a job it truly is. It was very eye-opening experience for me.
Well, yeah. And again, not to get totally kumbaya on this. I mean, it's just for everyone to know, like, I like Tim. I hope he likes me. And I'm not paid or endorsed to say these things, but you really start thinking about that cycle, right? And it's one of the things that's played really big on my mind is as far as we look at why are interest rates at these such high levels. And it's like, guys and gals, 32+% of like what creates inflation, right? Basically our growth is housing industry related, right? And so just like you said, that it touches everything from not only the people buying and selling to then how that impacts, our schools, how that impacts employers, how that impacts, this could go on and on, but the trades and the big box stores, the Home Depots, and you got so many different people touched by it to then understand that is why we have these high rates, because if you can slow down 32% of that core inflation, then we're going to get a lower inflation. And so, but in that cycle of this all is to say, okay, if you buy into it, right? If you buy into home ownership, right? Kind of that American dream. And again, not to get too romantic into it, but the rights of our Constitution to property, right? And to say you buy into it, your realtor is expertly guiding you on that. They're hopefully helping us to make reasonable buys and sales, and as much as we can to not let the market go too crazy one direction or the other, right? And then in that same vein, that realtor is contributing to RAPAC and to their association that's defending their rights. It just seems like this, like you got to buy in, and the whole cycle should work as long as everyone believes in it, right?
Yeah, as long as, you're not missing a puzzle piece and all the hands are linked together, it's definitely a well-oiled machine. And you're right. I mean, I talked about how I believe in the real estate industry. I still personally think owning a home is, the bedrock of the American dream, and how I talked about the real estate industry almost touches every other aspect of society. Your inflation example is a perfect indicator of that. And I think buyers out there may have gotten a little spoiled in 2020 and 21 and parts of 22. 2-3% interest rates are unparalleled. I think when my parents bought their first house, they were paying 18-20+% interest rate. So if you look over the history, with the numbers that we're at right now, our 6s and our 7s, it's not unprecedented. I just think since it doubled from the unbelievable 2s to 3s, people have gotten skittish. But I think as the Fed starts to kind of tamper down a little bit in 2023, we're going to see that start to decrease back down to what people view as a more reasonable level. And I think the real estate market's really going to balance out in 2023, which we need.
Yeah. Well, and then going back to that, if that RAPAC pulls the levers, and if we're just 30% of that, that means there's another 70-ish% of other industry that they could pull levers on. and we need to be kind of supporting our own, right? I would say, hey, you can slow down the corporate and the corporations and all these different things before you slow down housing, and we need someone to fight for us in that, right?
Yeah, and that's part of it. We have a whole team of economists at the federal and the state level that are advocating to the Fed, our elected officials. I mean, it always goes back to, I think our members are so unaware of what our government affairs departments and teams are really doing. It's a little bit of ignorance is bliss, where they don't know about the fights that are going on and the victories that averted near disaster sometimes. But all of that is possible because of the fundraising that's going on. Without RAPAC, there is no government affairs department. So without the war chest behind us, we're not successful. And it goes back to the education of how do we connect all the dots for our members from the final result that they are just, oh, that's great, cool, I don't have to worry about this anymore, to step one of what their $30 investment could have done.
Yeah. And I think everyone it should be, anyone that's lived through the last 3 years very much knows that government can impact your life severely and directly, right? Not making any political commentary on how certain things are handled. I always make the joke though, like my wife has gotten more politically involved and watches more things than I'm like, what are you watching on Facebook? Right? It's like, and I love her for it, right? She's gotten more active in this. I'm like, cause you start doing things that impacted her life and her schedule and her children. And so she's now more hyper aware and vigilant on things and following politics more than I've ever seen. And so if anything, I hope that those affiliates and realtors understand that a 7% interest rate, where we got in October, took people that you were serving out of the market, right? This changed your life, not only the people you serve, not only then the commissions you could have earned and the community you could have given back to, right? And along with, improving your own financial position, but that these things are serious, right? This is impacting you. And if you don't have a dog in the fight or aren't contributing to that dog in the fight, then you're just waiting to see what happens next.
Yeah, regardless of which side of the political aisle you sit on or how you feel about everything that transpired, the last couple of years, like you said, truly did just show what an impact government has on your life. And no matter who you vote for, you need to get out there and vote. You need to get out there and be active because it's going to impact your life, and you might as well have some say in it.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, this has been enlightening and awesome. I think I don't have the celebrity power to hold people much longer, probably. Not saying your celebrity power, mine. This isn't that type of podcast. But do you have anything else to say to maybe to that audience of realtors that we hope will catch onto this or share this and think, hey, you need to check that $30 box and maybe even more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always here. I have an open door policy to all of our members. I appreciate you giving me the platform to come on today, Chris. I thought it was a really good and enlightening conversation. Take a look at our Arizona Realtors website, aaronline.com, not just on the government affairs side, but the tech helpline that we have. I really want to educate our members on the benefits that our associations have for them. You're paying your dues. You might as well utilize the services that are there for you. So check out our website. My contact information is on there. If you would ever like to reach me, there's a RAPAC homepage. If you want to read more about RAPAC or potentially make an investment, we would love you to do so. But thanks for having me on, Chris.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.